Hey, it's Paris. You know, I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
Gatorade is the #1 proven electrolyte blend designed to hydrate better than water. So you can lose more sweat and raise your game. Gatorade, is it in you?
This message is sponsored by Greenlight. With school out, summer is the perfect time to teach our kids real-world money skills they'll use forever. Greenlight is a debit card and the #1 family finance and safety app used by millions of families, helping kids learn how to save, invest, and spend wisely. Parents can send their kids money and track their spending and saving, while kids build money confidence and skills in fun ways. Start your risk-free Greenlight trial today at greenlight.com/Spotify. That's greenlight.com/Spotify.
Hello, and welcome to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. We are so excited to bring you this show.
Our podcast is all about unraveling all of your favorite mysteries from the Assassin's Creed games. Each episode, we'll be talking about a different topic in the Assassin's Creed universe. From Pieces of Eden, solar flares, and the Isu, to the Hidden Ones, the Order of Ancients, and of course, the Animus, we will seek to uncover it all.
So join us, and maybe even take a leap of faith.
Hello and welcome to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. My name is Shelby. I'm one of your co-hosts for this show, and I'm joined here by my other co-host.
Hey, I am Austin, also known as Teacup.
That you are. So we are back. I know we've had a little bit of a break, but we are back with another Everything You Need to Know About episode. And today we are talking about a topic I don't think we have ever talked about on the Lorecast in a general view. I know we've talked about specific ones. I know we've talked about them as how they relate to Valhalla, but I don't think we have ever done an overview entire episode on this topic.
No, we have not. It is now time. I have been putting this off because it opens a can of worms, but it is interesting. We're talking about stages.
So I just am curious, what can of worms does this open?
Just the idea of like what classifies as a sage. And there's a debate in fandom of like, do the Norse sages really count as sages? And there's some big differences that are in them. So, like I said, there was a debate on what classifies as a sage, how sages are different than hybrids, and it just brings up a lot of questions. So this is important. Sages can be divided into 2 categories or 3 categories, depending on what you're using to classify them. The first classification, 2, is based on the method in which they are created. So there are 2 what they call the method of salvation, which are attempts to save the Isu from the Great Catastrophe, which we learn about a lot of these methods in Assassin's Creed 3 when we're playing as Desmond and we're walking around the Grand Temple and we get all of those memories from the Isu. And then we learn about the 7th method of salvation in Valhalla through the Asgard simulations. So the 5th method of salvation, which is where Aita and another sage's lineage come from, was an attempt to merge the Isu consciousness within the human genome, which they knew that the humanity would come out on top, basically, of the Great Catastrophe. And we know this from that, like, that was an understanding because Odin, or Javi, in the simulations says something to either Loki or another person that, like, did you know that the humans are going to survive Ragnarok? So this idea that the humans are going to come out on top from the Great Catastrophe is prevalent within the Isu.
I was just going to say, isn't that Norse mythology in general that, like, the humans would survive Ragnarok? And, like, obviously that's, like, our world too, but, like, that's just also a Norse belief that they've incorporated into this, correct?
Yes. But basically what they're saying is that, like, Ragnarok, the idea of Ragnarok is this great catastrophe.
Right.
And so the 5th method attempts to do this, and Aita, the husband of Juno, volunteers to do this. And it causes, like, it doesn't go well. It doesn't mesh well. And it causes madness and psychosis, and it results in, like, Juno having to kill Aita because of what it does to him. So that's the 5th method of salvation. Later, Juno and a bunch of other Isu basically secretly continue to work on this method. And even though Minerva and Jupiter said it's too risky and it's too much time, we're going to abandon it and focus on other methods. Well, Juno keeps working on it, and that brings into the 7th method of salvation, which is an incorporation through the world tree, using that to disperse the human genome. And basically, that allows it to be passed down. The difference is, and we'll talk about this, the 5th method of salvation allows for a continuous reincarnation. The 7th method of salvation is only once. So there will be no other sage of Odin now that Eivor is dead.
I'm sure that I knew Juno and Aida were married. I'm sure that I knew that. However, I don't remember knowing that. But also, is Aida more of a, like, pro-human, or is he just as anti-human as Juno?
He is pro-Juno, is probably how I would describe him.
Okay. Interesting. I guess I have been thinking this whole time that he was more of a, like, friend to humanity. And so him being married to Juno just kind of threw me for a loop there. But I'm on the same page. I'm tracking with you now.
Right. So the other way we could categorize sages is by which deity is their lineage. So we have 3 that are in there. Obviously, Aida's lineage is the one that we know the most about because those are the ones that we have the most sages about. But there's another one. I'm going to pronounce this as Vejovis, who is a god from the Mediterranean area, Roman, Greek, all other tribes around that area. And we'll talk about him. But he's another one that has sages. And he kind of accomplishes this a little differently, a similar method of the fifth method of salvation like Aita does, but he enters what's called the gray, which is like this liminal space that exists outside of our world. Like Juno hides out in there, and it causes him to pass down his lineage that way. And then the Norse branch, which is its own kind of different thing there. So each branch of Sage is slightly different, though they all share one thing in common. And this is the important thing. Sages are humans who have inherited the DNA of a single and specific Isu. And it lies dormant in their genetic code, eventually bubbling up to the surface. Now, sages are different than demigods or hybrids. Even though probably the Order of Ancients would classify them all as tainted ones. But basically, we're at a rectangle and square here analogy. All sages are hybrids, not all hybrids are sages. And there is a staunch difference, and we'll get into this later in the episode when we talk about their genetic makeup. The difference in the amount of Isu DNA is astronomical.
Okay. Everything that I just had that I was going to say, you just touched on it. So I was going to say, but it sounds like a square rectangle thing. And then I was like, oh, but it kind of, yeah, it just everything I had in my brain, you thought. So we are definitely on the same page.
Right. So hybrids are, as we know, are a result of inbreeding or breeding between Isu and humans and result in a high concentration of Isu DNA in the individual, but they are their own person alone. A sage has an Isu living in their DNA within their genetic code that results in almost a multiple personality like relationship. Now, it is to note here that like this is not a one-for-one comparison for dissociative identity disorder, and Assassin's Creed does not at all say like, oh, people who have dissociative identity disorder are actually sages, because the Isu personality, they're not competing with one another. A lot of times in DID or dissociative identity disorder, those personalities are competing for control, and different triggers end up who's controlling the, like, making the host person, the main personality, going in behind the scenes. No, it's more of like the Isu personality does attempt to take over, but it's not this like, oh, fugue state happens, you don't remember what's happening, you don't do anything. And we know it's not like that, both from how we've seen Eivor experience it and how we, in Mirage, we see Basim experience it as well. I'm not going to go into big details on Mirage because that game's still new and I don't want to do any kind of spoilers. So another interesting note about this is that there have been several times throughout history where multiple sages have existed at the same time. So it's not really like a standard reincarnation like the Avatar. Like sometimes we think about the Avatar, when Aang dies, Korra is born. Like that is not how this works. These sages can be alive at the same time. In fact, in the modern day, John Standish and Elijah, son of Desmond, are alive at the same time. Both are equally sages.
Well, and in Valhalla, you have like 5 alive at once, too.
Right, but those are sages of they're different Isu. Elijah and John Standish are both sages of Aida.
Oh, okay. Okay, interesting.
And then this is kind of like a last fun little fact. Darby McDevitt, who is one of the big writers for Assassin's Creed, says he drew inspiration from the sages from a Doctor Who character called the Master, who was a recurring villain to the Doctor, who goes through a similar kind of regeneration, reincarnation that Doctor Who does. So if you're a Doctor Who fan and an Assassin's Creed fan, here is where your fandoms intersect. I personally do not watch the show, so I can't speak to any of that. So any thoughts or questions before we kind of dive into like characteristics?
No, I don't have any questions. The only thing I would add is that I'm much less confused than I used to be.
Oh, well, good. Good.
Already.
So sages are born with their own personality and their own memories. So like Eivor is born Eivor, and then Odin's personality starts creeping up. And, similar with Bartholomew Roberts, similar with John Standish, similar with Elijah, similar with Francois Germain, like all these different sages that we have, they all have their own personality. There is a main human personality that exists in all of this. The memories of the Isu that they're incarnated normally surface sometime in early adulthood, but it is not unheard of for them to surface during childhood. I think it just depends on what the trigger is. So the surfacing of these memories is described as a very traumatic event. Now, these are only true for the Aita and Vejovis sages. The Norse's is a little different, but it's very traumatic, often resulting in the individuals, the personalities, the human personalities going insane. And Elijah kind of sums up what it means to be a sage of Aita in this. He goes, "Do you know what a sage is, Richmond?" As he's talking to someone. "It's what I am. And it means that today isn't the day that the gods return. They're already here. They were merely parasitical, not resplendent. You see, Richmond, being a sage means Aita, Isu scientist and husband of Juno herself, hid his memories in your DNA, and it has bubbled up to the surface."
So I do have thoughts about this one. And the way that I think sages are kind of presented, at least the Norse sages, and I know that you've said they're different in Valhalla and even a little bit in Black Flag, it's very much presented as this kind of accidental thing. As something that just happens because of the DNA, and we don't know how, and we don't know why. It just happens. But Elijah here presents this as very much like intentional, that Aita, quote, hid his memories in your DNA. Like that is an intentional act that he did on purpose.
Yes, he did do it on purpose, and all of the Isu hid it on purpose. I think it's less about, I don't misinterpret this, that like Aita looked into the future and chose everyone who was going to be a sage. That's not what he's saying. It's saying that through his own experiments, he hid his memories in the DNA of the human genome.
Okay, so he's not choosing people. He's just choosing the human genes to hide his DNA in.
Correct. Some sages, as Elijah, are able to keep the memories at bay and maintain their personalities as the dominant personality and dominant memories, allowing themselves to live with the conflicting memories and not lose themselves in this. However, no one knows really how they did this. It seems to just be a means of strong will. I think that Elijah's heritage helps him do this. Even though he never knows Desmond, I think that his heritage, and we'll talk about this in a little bit when we get to genetics, because this part of the research is what I found interesting. So these are a little bit about like kind of their abilities, their intellectual development. Sages are known for having very high levels of intelligence and have the ability to master concepts and skills that otherwise would prove challenging for the average human. And so like, this is also like understanding concepts and skills that are foreign to their background, which I think is a big thing there. Like someone being able to understand a concept that is, native to an African tribal religion, understand it on the level as someone who was born into it, which is a unique kind of gift there. However, it is unclear if sages inherit Aita's or Vejovis's memories as an Isu scientist and like know what he knows as an Isu scientist about the universe and how things work, without giving up their personality entirely so that Aita takes over.
So I would imagine that it's very much kind of an automatic thing, that I think you kind of mentioned this, that like they could not articulate, the sages could not articulate how they're able to resist these Isu, but some of them can do it. They just can't explain. It's kind of like it's an involuntary thing.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Or like, so you remember when we were watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And,
Yes.
Phil Coulson takes the whatever blood and then he starts writing all the symbols on everywhere or whatever.
Yes.
That's what I kind of think it like a little bit.
Like, you don't know why you're doing it, but there's something in your DNA that's like, yeah, you should be doing this. And I also think it makes sense that, like, so they've sent their DNA into the human double helix, whatever. And it makes sense to me that there would be this kind of like resistance built in, because, like, what if something goes wrong and Aita needs to pull out of the human? It kind of makes sense that there would be that kind of fail safe in there, which is probably what the human is drawing on to repel them a little bit.
Right. Yeah. He cannot pull himself out. That's part of the tragedy, is that he couldn't escape, which is why Juno killed him back in there. So, like, he will never escape this reincarnation sage thing. He is doomed. As long as humans exist, he is doomed to continue reincarnating.
Okay, but here's my thing. Did Juno actually give him the opportunity to pull back from the human?
That would be something that, I don't know, maybe she did, maybe she didn't.
Right. I'm just thinking out loud here, because we know Juno. We know she's evil. It makes sense to me that she would see this experimenting as a threat, and so she wouldn't give him the chance to, like, pull back from the experiment, and she trapped him in there under the guise of, well, he couldn't get out. I don't know.
Right. Juno isn't opposed to this experiment in any way, really, because it's a way of, like, okay, let's use the humans for our own benefit. Whereas, like, Jupiter and Minerva's solutions are like, let's ensure that the humans have the best foot forward to continue after us. Juno's plan is, let's hijack the humans so we can continue living on. But any other thoughts on this before we move to genetics and appearances?
No.
So this is fascinating. In Assassin's Creed, every human contains a little bit of Isu DNA. Every human in existence. So the average human comes anywhere between 2 10,000ths of a percent to 5 10,000ths of a percent of Isu DNA. If you want that in decimal points, that's 0.0002% to 0.0005%. Desmond Miles is the highest recorded human with the highest amount of Isu DNA. Now, that's not saying that there were humans or hybrids who had more than him. He is just the highest recorded. And it's good to know that, like, sages have only really been known to the assassins and Templars for a couple hundred years. And they've only had the technology to identify it for about 100, not 200 years, maybe. And so that's important to know that, like, there are people who probably have more Isu DNA than Desmond hybrids, but he is just the highest recorded. He's at like 1% Isu DNA, which likely putting Ezio, Connor, Hatham, Edward, Altair at a similar ratio, maybe more, maybe a little less, but his ancestors would have a similar amount, given that they have similar abilities. And the ability to use eagle vision is dependent upon you having Isu, this high concentration of Isu DNA. Sages are 5 to 6% concentration of Isu DNA. So that's 5 to 6 times the highest recorded hybrid. And I can't even do the math, the number's so big, of what the average human is.
So that is huge, first of all, the jump from a regular human to even Desmond to then the sages. However, it's crazy to me that it's so small, because like 5% of something is not a lot.
But I mean, think about it. It depends. It's kind of like that myth of large numbers that really comes into it, because think about like a 5-6% interest rate.
Yeah, but like a 90% interest rate, or even like a 24% interest rate. is so much, I don't know. I just feel like it's not a lot.
But like, think about like how balanced the human, like some people call like the human cocktail is. That like even like a small 1% increase in a certain neurotransmitter like dopamine or serotonin can really mess with your entire system a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's and
true.
So even these small influences into that would do that. But this suggests that a sage's eagle vision ability far outclasses all of the assassins that we play as.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes sense to me why Eivor and Bazum are able not only to see through the birds that they have, but also have a form of eagle vision as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense.
With Odin's sense, and then Bazum has eagle vision in the game, and it's awesome. And then just kind of their appearance, all sages appear, all Aita's sages, because those are the ones that we really have pictured. And then Bazum and the Norse sages, too, are similar to their ancestors, but they all possess heterochromia, which Aita apparently had, with one eye yellowish brown and one eye a bluish green.
Only the Aita sages have the eye thing, not the others.
Yes. And so all the known sages of Aita have been male, but the assassins theorize and believe it possible that Aita's reincarnation is not limited to gender. So in anyone of any gender expression could be a sage, which leads to an interesting theory that I want to pause here and talk about. The clan chief, the woman who leads Connor's tribe, has heterochromia in the exact pattern of a sage.
That's really interesting because, I think that all of the things she knows has been kind of like whisked away of like, oh, well, she knows it because she was being communicated with by the Isu and because of the apple, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it does make sense that she would have some other way of being contacted because she knows like a lot of information, like a lot.
And, we go to that same tribe in Valhalla, and one of the clans, one of the tribeswomen that we meet there also has heterochromia in the same pattern.
Now, do you remember if that tribeswoman that we meet is one of the chiefs or no?
I have no idea, because like they do a really good job and I really love this, but there's no like language. The language barrier never gets broken.
Yeah.
Which makes historical sense.
Yes. And I have to say that arc of Valhalla was my favorite by far. It was so well done.
All right. Well, before we talk about the other types of sages and then get into some known sages that we have, and then I'll have a discussion question where we'll kind of bridge Dragon Age and Assassin's Creed together, which doesn't happen very often because they're very different games from one another. But we'll do that. But first, let's go to our mid break.
All right, let's get into it.
This episode is brought to you by Cadillac. Cadillac certified service technicians are factory trained to fit your vehicle with the tires specifically developed for it. And with our tire price match guarantee, you get the best fit for the best deal. Let us do the work. Available on select eligible tire brands at participating dealers only. Offer ends 12/31/2025. Terms apply. See dealer for complete details. Visit Cadillac.com/service to learn more.
Jif peanut butter. It's that jiffing good, it doesn't really need advertising. So instead, enjoy the calming sounds of the ocean. Jif. Ooh, it's that jiffing good. Get your Jif at Jif.com.
Learning through play starts with Lego Duplo. With Lego Duplo, toddlers can develop real-life skills while having fun with colorful bricks made just for them. Large, easy to grip, and safe to explore. When children express themselves with Lego Duplo, they build patience, problem-solving, and empathy. See your child learn perseverance and self-expression with everything they imagine and create. Visit lego.com/preschool to learn more.
Ma cos'è? Shoot! Shoot a flying demon!
I'm sure you can put this to better use than I can.
Oh, what's this, Greenie? Assassin Christmas?
I needs to be oiled before I goes to the games.
Well, I would have been happy to assist if you were in any state to compete.
I likes to be oiled.
Well, that's obvious.
Okay, so this is the middle of the show where we have a lot of things to do, but the first thing we always do is thank our patrons. Thank you all so much, all of you that have ever supported us, who currently support us, or if you may support us in the future, thank you all so much. And we do shout out certain patrons at certain tiers. We always shout out new patrons, and we always shout out patrons at the Mentor tier assassin and the Isu Demigod tier patrons. And so today we are shouting out Voss, who is indeed a Mentor tier assassin. Thank you so much for your support of the podcast. You truly help us keep going. Now, if you want to get your name read out on the show, come on the show, or have even your own episode, you can do that at all different tiers. So definitely go to Patreon and sign up. You can find it in the link in the episode description or at patreon.com/ACLorecast. Now, if you can't financially support us, the next best way to support us is to leave us a rating or a review. And so I do have one to read today. This one comes from Reed J13, who says, "Great lore, 5 stars. Only a few episodes in and I'm already hooked. Thank you for your hard work putting all this information together." And thank you so much for that awesome review. And if you want to come hang out with us, talk about all things Assassin's Creed, tell me I am confused on whatever episode, because I probably was, or thank Austin for all his hard work, definitely come over and join our Discord server. It's where we hang out and talk about all kinds of games, including Assassin's Creed, Dragon Age, Star Wars, and all kinds of stuff. So definitely come hang out and join us in the Discord server. And now the next thing and the last thing I have to talk about in the middle of the show is my playthrough of Assassin's Creed Syndicate. And I know we've been on break for the past week or so, and so I do have some playthrough updates for you. I know it's been a while, but I do have a few updates. And so the first one is that I did meet Henry Green, and I know that we did the deep dive on Evie and Jacob, but I don't remember Austin ever mentioning that Henry Green was an Indian assassin, that he's from India. And so I was not expecting that when I met him for the first time. But also, I'm pretty sure he's related to Arbaz Mir. Is that correct, Austin?
I don't know off the top of my head.
I'm pretty sure he is. But regardless, I did meet Henry Green. I also met Charles Dickens, which was exciting. I also feel that Jacob is an idiot.
Yes.
Like, why is he so obsessed with his little gang?
Because he's a dumbass.
I just do feel like he's so, and it's funny because he and Evie are the same age. And I feel like she's so much more mature than he is. Like, he is so childish and annoying all the time. But at the same time, they do say girls mature faster than boys. And also, I get the feeling that she's the eldest sibling.
Yes, I would describe it as this, and this is just because this show is on my mind because I'm rewatching it. Evie is, if these two characters from Brooklyn Nine-Nine were siblings instead of in a relationship, Jacob is Jake Peralta, and Evie is Amy Santiago. And that explains their relationship entirely.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. But I am very frustrated with Jacob. He is so annoying to me. And every time I get to his sequences, I'm just like, I just want to play as Evie. Like, can we not? But I don't completely hate him. Like, he's not the worst character. He just irritates me. And then the last little update I have on my playthrough is that I am hilariously bad at driving the carriage thing.
That's funny. You'll get there, maybe. I mean, I don't know, because you still cursed the day of the carriage minigame mission from Assassin's Creed 2.
That's true. I do. Yeah, I don't think I'm ever gonna get to it because I'm always bad at I'm always bad at it in driving in anything. So not in the real world, in video games.
But anyway, let's get to the sages.
Yes, let's get back into it.
This episode is sponsored by Friskies, who would like to tell your cats hi. Now, if that didn't get your cat's attention, there is one thing that always does the trick. Just pour some Friskies crunchy food in the bowl and you'll hear those paws come running. Works every time. With so many Friskies choices, you can always bring your cats running from their secret napping spots. There's always more to explore. See for yourself at friskies.com or visit your local store.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Malaka.
A party? I wasn't invited. Neither were the horses. I'm sure she just misplaced my invitation. Stuck. See if you can find something to pry it open. Honor? What are you up to? No, don't do that. There's no way of knowing what's on the other side.
All right. So Vejovis, we don't know a lot about. We know that he is the Roman god of regeneration and healing, venerated by the Romans for that. He's similar, like I said, he entered the gray and passed on his genetic material. His sages seem to operate similar to Aita's, though, like I said, there's not a lot known about that. But I think it's interesting that this philosophy of reincarnation is associated with a god of regeneration and healing.
Well, it might be intentional that the god came to be known that for this.
Right. Again, interesting. Not a lot known. There's a lot of different things in there. The Norse sages are interesting because, like I said, they are similar, but they have different traits. And like I said, one of those biggest traits is that they are a one-time reincarnation. They share all the traits that the Isus. Other than that, their memories tend to be less traumatic. They tend to be a little more integrated. It is also conflicting because Basim's experience is a lot more traumatic than Eivor's experience. And I think that probably has to go with upbringing, because Basim is he's brought up in this more monotheistic Islamic Middle East in Baghdad versus Eivor, who is raised as a Norse Viking and Odin presents as Odin. That, I feel like that would be less traumatic than, say, Basim basically has experiences of a demon haunting him versus Eivor has, here's this creepy old guy who I know is Odin, who is the king of all creepy old guys talking to me.
Yeah, I do think that's a fair point. And I think, if you think about Ezio and his shock at Rodrigo Borgia, not believing in what he says to believe in and having all this stuff behind the scene. I mean, it's kind of the same thing because the Catholic Church is ever present during that time, and so it makes sense because our contexts are we can't get out of our context. Like it just impacts our life, and not it doesn't even matter like what your belief system is. It's just where you grow up and what you grow up around impacts your worldview. It just does.
Right, definitely. And so that's a big difference with the Norse reincarnations. And like I do want to go by, we see that like in Valhalla, obviously Eivor is Odin, Sigurd is Tyr, Basm is Loki. There are other theories like Volta, or her mother is Freya. Halfdan, they say, is Thor. There's just a lot of different incarnations that happen across there. But we're mainly focused on the Odin and Loki thing because they're the ones who are put at odds and at the focus of that story.
But I guess the confusing thing for me is, and I guess we don't really know about Vejovis, but for these Norse gods and these Norse reincarnations, they're not, unlike the Aita sages, they do not have the same appearance. Or do they?
So it's unclear because Basm and Loki do look alike, but it's unclear whether or not they're sharing genetic appearances because they share genetic appearances, which is different because we see sages in the real world. Like we encounter John Standish outside of the Animus, and he looks like Aita. Like he looks like the rest of the sages. But the Norse sages, we only ever encounter like what the Isu looked like and what the humans look like through simulation. So we don't know if like it's the Animus correcting to explain this, or the Asgard simulations that Eivor goes through, presenting it in a way where Eivor will understand and comprehend it. And that's why they look similar, or if they actually physically look similar.
Okay, but by that logic, could we not also argue that, okay, we meet John Standish in the modern day universe, but when we see Aita, it's through the Animus, and the Animus is correcting that to look like John Standish? Or when we meet Bartholomew Roberts in Black Flag, it's through the Animus, and the Animus is correcting that.
So no, because we don't ever see John Standish until the end. So we've already encountered Bartholomew Roberts in the Animus simulation and Aita before we have ever seen John Standish. We hear his voice through the thing, but we don't ever actually see him until he's captured us and rambling.
Okay, fair.
So that, any other last questions about these sages in general before I start listing some? And I've got their dates and a couple where we see them. So the first recorded sage of Aita goes all the way back to the 3rd millennium BCE. Now Shelby's gonna have to correct me with my dates, because like, would that be the 4000s BCE or the 2000s BCE?
So the 3rd millennium is 3000 to 2001 BCE.
Awesome. Okay. So that's the first recorded sage, which is some Sumerian sage that we just get a list of. That's the first recorded one. Then there's one 3,000 years later called the Wanderer, which is around the 1st century CE. So that's, for time frame, that's like the 1st century is from 0 to 99 CE AD. So, you know, a lot happens in there, but we're really looking at like the end of like the rise of the Augustan Roman Empire, the life and death of Jesus of Nazareth. All of that happens in the 1st century, the rise of Christianity. This Wanderer is a sage during that time. So then the next sage comes in the 5th century. We get 2 in the 5th century, which is the 400s minus 1. So there's a Hunnic sage, and then Brendan of Clonfert, which lives from the end of the 5th century into the end of the 6th century. He lives a long time. Then there's a Byzantine sage in the 6th century. There's a Mayan sage in the 13th century. So we've got gaps here, large gaps of 3,000 years, several hundred years without getting a recorded sage of Aita. And then we start getting into more named sages, which is Jacques de Molay, who is Grand Master of the Templar Order in France when the Templars are declared heretical and outlawed. That is the opening of Assassin's Creed Unity. He is a sage. And then there's a Chinese sage in the 14th century. A Caribbean sage died in 1516. We have a record of that. And then Thomas Cavanaugh Jr., who was a sage around Boston, what looks like around the mid-colonial period, 1652 to 1706. That's around the colonial period. So he's around there. Bartholomew Roberts, who we know from Assassin's Creed Black Flag, that's 1618 to 1722. Francois Thomas Germain, who is the main villain of Assassin's Creed Unity. He is also a sage living in France. He is killed in 1794. There's an Indian sage born around the turn of the century between the 1800s and the 1900s. And then that we encounter another sage when we experience the life of Lydia Fry in Assassin's Creed Syndicate. We help Winston Churchill hunt down a master spy for the Germans in World War I, who is a Templar. And that's 1916 is when they die.
So this Indian sage born 1885, and then the master spy died 1916. This is an example of two being alive at one time. Possibly.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. And if you look at like Thomas Cavanaugh Jr. and Bartholomew Roberts were alive at the same time as well. And then so David Jones, who was born around circa 1950, John Standish, 1975 to 2013, and then Elijah, surname unknown. His surname is not Miles because he never knew Desmond Miles. He's born circa 2005.
But he could have been Miles if his mom knew and named him that.
Yes, that's true. But why would you name your child that and then not tell your child who your father is?
That's fair.
He's never named with a surname, so we don't know.
Okay.
And then Vejovis' sages are less known. A sage called Cadmus around the 5th century BCE. This is really interesting to me. There is a sage of Vejovis named Kefri around Egypt in the 1st century BCE, which is about like 100 years-ish before Baig and Aya are on the scene. So something moving around there. There's a sage called Alva in the 9th century CE, a Faisal in the 12th century. I'm going to pronounce this as Julia in the 13th century CE, and then a modern day one named Joey.
I'm sorry, I'm headcanoning that this is Joey Tribbiani from Friends.
Okay, it can do that. So I promised you a Dragon Age Assassin's Creed crossover.
You did.
Do sages not remind you of kind of what is happening with Flimnathal, or even Solus in general, of him saying at first there was Solus and then there was the Dread Wolf?
Yeah, I definitely see it. I see it more honestly with Flemeth and Mythal than I do with anything Solus does, because the reality is that Mythal sends a spark of herself into another being, into Flemeth, and if you want to headcanon it, into Andraste. And so I do feel like that's much more of a comparison than anything Solus does. But I agree, it's very similar to Sages. It's less scientific, of course. It's more of a fantasy genre of the fantastical, magical, and not science fiction, the way that Assassin's Creed leans more towards, but it very much is a similar, if not the same, principle.
Yeah, I really kind of thought about that. I think in general, and we kind of just thought about our sages, I think sages offer an interesting concept. And I think it would be really interesting to play as a sage of Aida or something more along the lines of this 5th method of salvation, just to see okay, how do they react differently to Pieces of Eden? How do they engage differently in what happens? And, we follow Elijah in the comics and there's a lot going on. But as far as we know, Elijah is the first sage in the line of Desmond that we know about. And so that tells me that these sages are not a genetic thing that is passed down genetically from father to son or mother to son, mother, daughter, father to daughter, whatever, parent to child. Even though Desmond has such a high concentration of Isu DNA that I think that affects how the sage affects Elijah. But I just think it's interesting. I have sages. When I said they open a can of worms, what I really meant to say is sages pose a lot of questions more than they do answers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I definitely see that. I think that they are naturally a little bit confusing just because there's so much unknown surrounding the conversation. But I do think it's interesting that it's not a genetic hereditary thing, because like it I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of different ways they can go with it, but I would be curious to see if there are any sages, if there are any other Isu who may have done this or something similar to create sages of other Isu gods.
Right. And I think it's worth mentioning again here is that like the goal of the fifth method of salvation was and even the seventh was that we will wake up, take over our human host, and rebuild the Isu Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't happen. So it makes me call into question, like, what are Basim's motives at this point? Because he's not a part of the group that does this. He kills one of them and sneakily takes their place.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know the answer.
But we'll find out. We'll find out.
Maybe we'll be left asking these questions for 10 years.
Y'all, I do not want to be waiting 10 years for the end of this story.
I mean, fair. I mean, I don't think we'll be waiting 10 years for the next Assassin's Creed game, but maybe for the answer to this question specifically. Who knows?
I mean, I guess I've been waiting 15 years for the end of the story already.
Well, yeah, anyway, let's move on.
All right.
Did you have any final things to add about sages in general?
No, I think that's all I got for today.
Okay. Well, thanks for doing this research. As always, this is a very fascinating topic. I know several people have left comments on our Spotify asking us to talk about sages. And so thank you, first of all, to those of you who are leaving comments and requesting topics. Anybody can do that. But we hope that we did it justice and that we answered at least as many of your questions as we possibly can. I know that not all of them can be answered, but we have presented what knowledge we have. So thank you, Austin, for doing the research, and thank you all for listening to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. Thanks for listening to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. You can find us on Twitter at AC Lorecast.
If you have any lore questions or topics to unpack, join our Cups Podcasting and More Discord server. It's the best place on the internet. You can also support us financially through our Patreon. Find us on patreon.com/Assassin's Creed Lorecast. The Assassin's Creed Lorecast is part of the Robots Radio Network. For more information about the Robots Radio Network, join the Discord server via the link in our episode's description.
If you enjoyed the show or learned something new today, please subscribe, leave us a review, and join the Patreon. And if you enjoyed our intro and outro music, make sure you give a big thank you to Pipeman Studios. Thank you, Pipeman. Thanks again for listening to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. And always remember, Assassins, stay in the shadows to serve the light.
This episode is brought to you by FX's Alien Earth, the official podcast. Each week, host Adam Rogers is joined by guests, including the show's creator, cast, and crew, in this exclusive companion podcast. They will explore story elements, deep dive into character motivations, and offer an episode-by-episode behind-the-scenes breakdown of each terrifying chapter in this new series. Search FX's Alien Earth wherever you listen to podcasts.
Want to live better? We've got a lot of work to do. Join Chris Hemsworth in National Geographic's new Disney Plus original series, Limitless. Live better now.
I'm diving headfirst into cutting-edge science to uncover 3 powerful secrets to living better right now. The growth that occurs through any challenging experience is really what we seek.
Chris Hemsworth stars in Limitless. Live better now. Now streaming on Disney Plus and Hulu.
It's showtime.